Screen.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar, our first webinar of March. My name is Sonia Siddiqui, and joining me today once again is Ronald Peters from RBC. Hi Ronald.
Hello.
We're very happy to have Ronald back with us. He did an amazing webinar with us last month, so I'm glad that he's back with some more tips for interviews. So let's get started, but just give me a moment before. I just want to make sure that everyone is properly connected. So everyone watching, please know that we will not be able to hear you because you are all on listen only mode. But if you have any questions, please hold off till the end of the presentation. After Ronald has finished his presentation, he will be taking questions. So you'll see a Q&A tab, type in your questions there, and we will take them towards the end. And for best results, please use a laptop or a desktop. A computer, you might not get the full effect of the webinar using mobile devices such as tablets or cell phones. And for better results, please use a Google Chrome. And moving forward, telling you a little bit about working jobs yourselves. Just in the past year alone, we were able to serve 34,000 job seekers, and we work with over 2,200 employers, including RBC being one of our biggest sponsors for our programs and online delivery, such as the webinars. And we've got 30 tailored programs, which include our bridging programs, programs for newcomer youth, program for youth overall, programs for women, leadership, entrepreneurship, and other sector-specific bridging programs as well. And we've got 6 locations in the GTA with our new 7th location coming up in Newmarket sometime soon. So stay tuned for that. We've got 3 national programs and online services, such as the webinars we bring to you. And we also do virtual open houses and virtual job fairs as well. So, Ronald, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Sonia. All right. Okay, so good morning again, everyone, and I'm happy to be able to join you here today. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I certainly look forward to the question and answer section. I always think that's very useful for everyone involved. All right, next slide, please, Sonia. Okay, so by way of introduction again, my name is Ronald Peters. I'm an inclusive recruitment specialist here at RBC. And my role here is to sort of engage with candidates from diverse communities across Canada, including newcomers, persons with disabilities, and to a lesser extent, Indigenous talent. One of my other colleagues actually manages the Indigenous segment for the bank. I go around promoting RBC as an employer of choice, and I hold workshops and recruitment related events, and make recommendations, do profiles of candidates to our recruitment team. I moved to Canada in 2009, so I'm not very much a newcomer per se, but I was once technically a newcomer as well. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. That's near South America, near Venezuela. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so RBC. I know some of you might have done your own research, but you know, for those who don't know, and just to kind of maybe refresh for those who probably did some research before, RBC is the largest financial services institution in Canada. We comprise of 80,000 employees, and we serve 16 million clients in over 37 countries. Our business is divided into 5 main segments. It's personal and commercial banking, investor and treasury services, capital markets, wealth management, and insurance. And all these groups are supported by functional areas like finance, audit, human resources, and for sure, definitely technology. Our technology group is actually probably the fastest growing area of the bank, and there's a lot of opportunities there, ranging from your programmers to your artificial intelligence specialists, blockchain specialists. Anything that's going on in technology right now, RBC has a part to play in that process as well. So there's a lot of opportunities there. Next slide, please. So in terms of our commitment to diversity and inclusion, we serve our clients in over 200 languages, including ASL, that's American Sign Language for some of our deaf customers. 45% of our executives are women, 35% of our workforce are visible minorities. And in terms of a culture and in terms of how the employees network, we have 24 employee resource groups supporting everything from women, visible minorities, and newcomers to Canada, the LGBTQ plus community, persons with disabilities, Indigenous people of Canada, veterans, etc., globally. And here you see that we are ranked number 3 in the global top 25 most diverse and inclusive companies in the 2019 Diversity and Inclusion Index. Next, please. Next slide, please, Sonia. So just going a little further, talking about our approach and our culture around the whole newcomer talent space. In the Government of Canada, in collaboration with Higher Immigrants Ottawa, awarded RBC with a 2019 Employer Award for newcomer employment. And we are very much driven by the belief that we have to hire from the community to serve the community. So as the community has become much more diverse, we'll definitely see an ongoing need for diverse talent. Currently, we are the largest host of Career Edge interns, which helps newcomer talent gain meaningful work experience and launch their careers in Canada. I'll just pause a second here just to talk about Career Edge a little more. For those who don't know, I certainly encourage everyone to search up and do some research around Career Edge. It is an excellent way to get your foot in the door with many of the large corporations, including RBC here in Canada. It's a third-party organization. They provide short-term contract positions, and they work with large organizations like RBC. So we supply them with the roles that we have a need for, and they help to fill those roles for us. They have their own job board, so you can go on. Once you're registered with them, of course, you'll be able to get access to their job board and you'll see what opportunities there are. It's important to note that the jobs that we put on Career Edge, they do not show up on our regular job board. So it's a very sort of exclusive space. In 2017 and 2019, we hosted or participated in over 30 events for newcomers to Canada. And we actually were able to touch over 4,000 candidates. So it's really a pretty remarkable experience. Next slide, please. And just to kind of give you a little bit of insight into how we are internally, 42.5% of our Canadian recruiters are visible minorities. And in Toronto, one of our largest sort of employment markets, 48% of the recruiters are visible minorities. Many of us are first generation or second generation Canadians. So in terms of having that sort of cultural competence, because we all have some family or friends, who have come from other countries. So when we see resumes and you're telling your stories, it certainly resonates with us, and it certainly gives us better insight. And we're always appreciative and always open to candidates that we get coming in. Just a point of note, according to statistics, the Canadian visible minority workforce availability is 28%, so 28% or so of the working population are visible minorities, but we certainly over-index in that space, where we are at 48%. So it really goes to show our commitment and the results. So it's not just lip service, we're actually putting it into action, and it's reflective in our workforce. Next slide, please. Perfect. This is something, again, just another example of our commitment to the newcomer community. We are very much aware that newcomers will be driving the growth of Canada's population going forward for many years to come. And in a way, in an effort to respond to that, we have actually started to build out new locations in the communities that we serve called REC Meeting Place. And these are set up solely, or primarily I should say, to provide advice for newcomers. Not just banking advice, which is always a good foundational tool for newcomers, but we provide advice around job searching, resume writing, and a lot of other items that you may require to really settle and fulfill your dreams here in Canada. All right, next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So now that we've gotten that introduction out of the way, I want to focus in a little bit on interviews, which will be our topic for the rest of the presentation. Interviews are, well, probably the most critical part of the recruitment process, and being successful in your interview is really going to help determine if you get that job or not, if you start, how well you stand out from the competitors and are able to move forward with the organization. So next slide. So before an interview starts, there's the preparation process. All right. In preparing for an interview, so you've got that call, you know, we've advised or sent you an email inviting you to come in for interview. Your goal at that time is to do as much research as possible for the role, more on the company, as well, if possible, the team that you'll be working for. Usually the recruiter will give you, will let you know who you'll be coming to meet. And LinkedIn is your friend. You can certainly do a lot of research there just to get a little bit more insight into the managers or the team that you'll be working on. This research is going to be important, and we'll come to it in a few slides from now, but it will also be important for you in the interview process, all right? And when it comes to answering some of the questions and even asking questions of us. The next thing you wanna make sure to do is to prepare your directions and logistics for the interview. Now, I know on the surface it may sound like a simple task, but I do not want to diminish the importance of this, especially if you're going to a new physical location. You know, you're new to Canada, they're telling you to come downtown somewhere for an interview. You want to prepare directions and your logistics beforehand so that you'll be able to time yourself in terms of, you know, when to get there. So if you're having an interview for 1 p.m., you don't want to be frantically trying to figure out where you're going, you know, 2 minutes before the interview, right? You don't want to get there late and you don't want to get there flustered. At the same time, you also do not want to get to your location too early. So again, if your interview is 1 p.m., you do not want to go to the location at 12:30 and say, oh, you have an interview at 1 p.m. When you do that, it puts the person who is going to be interviewing you, you know, it might throw them off a little bit because they're now thinking, oh, there's somebody outside waiting for me. They might start to rush. They might get anxious. And then you're outside also anxious, also nervous. It does not make for a conducive interview situation. What I used to do when I was going through my whole job search phase, I would sometimes come early to the location, but what I'll do is I'll search for the nearest coffee shop nearby. So it could be a Tim Hortons, it could be a Starbucks. You can go there and sort of compose yourself, relax, maybe have a hot beverage, any last minute review you might want to do. You know, you just want to kind of take some time to compose yourself. And then maybe 10 minutes before the interview, then you say, okay, you know what, let me go upstairs to this building. You cross the street and you go in for your interview. All right, so that's just one tip I sort of always kind of recommend. In preparing for your interview, this is just a side note. If you needed some sort of accommodation, this is the time you want to tell the recruiter. All right. Now, so some candidates may have some sort of disability that they may require some sort of assistance for. Please let us know. We are here to help you. We will try to provide as reasonable an accommodation as is possible. It may mean if you have somebody who has severe anxiety, for example, instead of having an interview with 3-4 people on a panel, maybe we change the flow so that you have 3-4 one-on-one meetings back to back with different people, if that works for you. All right, so just a factor to take note of. Next slide, please. Okay, just some general sort of housekeeping tips for you personally. When you come to an interview, you might know this already, but we just like to reinforce it. You want to dress professionally and appropriately. Pay attention to your personal hygiene. Avoid wearing too much makeup or jewelry. You don't want anything to be distracting from the story that you're trying to tell us in the interview. And you do not use perfume or cologne. Some people have severe allergies to that. Again, you don't want to have something that distracts from the interview process that you are here for. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so preparation is done. Let's just talk a little bit about the types of interviews that we use. Usually the first one is a phone interview. You want to make sure that you have a clear phone line. You want to make sure that you prepare as if it's an in-person interview. You might be tempted to think, oh, it's just a phone interview. They're probably just going to ask me some background questions. I would encourage you not to think like that, because this interview could be as rigorous as an in-person interview. This interview is usually taken with the recruiter themselves, and they're the ones who will decide if you're going to move forward or not. All right, so have all your questions prepared, your answers prepared. If they don't ask you many questions, that's fine, but prepare like if they will have those questions ready for you. In terms of tone, you want to come across confident. You want to smile, be engaged and responsive. Now, when you smile over the phone, it actually changes the tone of your voice that they hear through the microphone. All right, so smiling is important. Avoid one-word answers. So if they ask you a question, don't be like, yes, no, okay. And if you have a lot of dead silence, dead pauses in between, it creates the impression that you are not engaged in the process. Are you being distracted by something? In terms of just one point about the clear phone line, usually they'll set up an appointment way in advance for you. So be prepared. I saw an incident. I'm sitting right in front of the recruiters. So the recruiter had an interview with someone, and the person was on a bus taking the phone call. So there's all the noises in the background distracting the recruiter. The recruiter was actually hearing that more than the candidate. All right, you do not want to leave a bad impression in the recruiter's mind. Video interviews, it is something that we have started to use more and more. Right now, we're doing it a lot for our campus roles, but that doesn't mean it will not come up more and more for some of our more professional type of roles. So again, you want to dress like it's an in-person interview, have a good body language, even though they might be seeing you from your shoulders up. You don't want to have a messy background. You don't want anything that will distract from what you're talking about. And then, of course, once you've passed those first round interviews, you have your in-person interview. Again, just like I mentioned in the slide before, be conscious of your body language. You want to be professional. And maintain eye contact. You shake hands confidently, maintain eye contact. I know in some cultures, we might not like making eye contact and being direct, but in this culture, making eye contact and being confident with your answers is a definite plus for you. Next slide, please, Sonia. Okay, so let's talk questions. In any interview, usually the first set of questions are your usual standard questions. It's like, tell me about yourself. And now usually they're talking here professionally, you know, talking about your career background and anything related to your career experiences. What are your top 3 strengths? Why should RBC hire you? And what attracted you to this role? These are questions you should be able to answer like the back of your hand. It should be that easy for you. Okay, it's always good to have these answers ready to these questions, and you want to practice as much as possible. And not because you might get these questions in a phone interview does not mean that they will not come up again in an in-person interview. So please be prepared to answer these questions at every round of the interview process. All right, because everybody's going to be meeting you for the first time. All right, next slide, please. All right, so behavioral questions. So once the standard questions have gone, you know, we get more into the behavioral questions. This is the real meaty part of the interview process. You know, and this is where they're looking for you to describe scenarios from your work, volunteer, or your life experiences. It's usually a signal that these questions are coming when you hear the recruiter or the manager who's interviewing you say something like, tell me about a time. So I gave some examples here. Tell me about a time you went above and beyond to help a customer. Tell me about a time you worked effectively under pressure. Tell me about a time you made a mistake and how did you handle it. That particular question, I always add it here because it's a good reminder. You know, there's question, you know, tell me about your weakness. Now, recruiters don't always come so direct anymore because it's always a tricky question. So they frame it as, tell me about a mistake and how do you handle it? The goal is to come out of that storytelling in a positive light. All right, so yes, you can talk about the mistake or a particular weakness, but what do you do to overcome it? What was the positive outcome at the end of that process? All right, so always be mindful of that particular question. Now, again, just some tips for you. If the question is asked and you're not sure exactly what was said or what really angle they're coming from with that question, don't be afraid to ask for clarity. Maybe to ask a little something specific, ask them to reframe the question. All right, you don't want to go down the wrong path. I've seen situations where candidates they hear the question and they start to rattle off an answer, and 2 or 3 minutes in, the recruiter has to say, oh, that's not really what I was asking you. You don't want to be in that situation where you're using up so much valuable time answering a question that was not asked. All right, and there's nothing wrong taking a few seconds, gather your thoughts before responding. All right, next slide, please. So staying with the whole notion about behavioral questions, just want to give some tips, an example of how you effectively respond to these questions. Again, it's not questions where you're going to be answering yes or no. They want you to kind of give some description. So one approach, it's called the STAR approach. You can also Google this. This is online. And it's a way of framing your responses to the questions. All right, and STAR stands for situation, task, action, results. So the situation gives the context in which you performed. What tasks did you do? What do you have to complete? The action, what you took, and results. What was the outcome? It's always good if you can add some sort of element to your answer. So if you finish something in 5 days instead of 7, if you were able to save the company $10 or whatever the case may be, all right, you want to somehow weave that into your answer if possible. And again, let's just go through an example. So tell me about the time you had to complete a task under a tight deadline. describe the situation and explain how you handle it. So the answer here, while I typically like to plan my work out in stages and complete it piece by piece, I can also achieve strong work under a tight deadline. So this person starts off the response by sort of reframing the question. All right, so now it's slowly building. The situation, once at a former company, an employee left days before a big project of his was due. Task, I was asked to take it over with only a few days to learn about and complete the project. Now, right there, they've set up a great scenario. As a recruiter, as a manager, I'm curious to know what the outcome was. You've grabbed my attention by starting this way. So what actions did I take? I created a task force and delegated work. And the results at the end, we all completed the assignment with a day, so that's your numerical, to spare. And then they finished off. I think I tend to thrive under tight deadlines. So it was a perfectly packaged answer and completed very succinctly. So this is the STAR approach. All right, again, this is something that you can practice. All right, next slide, please. Perfect. Now, you've done the standard questions, you've gone through the behavioral questions. You usually, provided there's enough time at the end, the recruiter or the manager will give you an opportunity to ask them questions. I cannot stress this enough. This is an important part of the process. You should always have questions to ask back of your interviewer. And this kind of leads me back to what I started with. This is where your research into the company and the role, or even the team, that manager you're talking to, will be effective for you. Think of it sometimes, you know what, we might not have a great interview. You know, you might not have felt like you answered the questions the best. You asking great questions at the end could serve to save that interview, and it can make you memorable in the process. You want to be memorable in the eyes of the recruiter and the manager. Because if it comes down to a situation where it was two final people that they had to decide from, you want to be the one they remembered, because you know what? He asked some really great questions. All right, so just to give some examples here. You know, you can make it a little personal about the person you're interviewing. What do you like? You're asking the interviewer, what do you like about working for RBC? What was your career journey? These are things that, you know, you give the person a chance to really talk about their experiences, and you're getting to learn a little bit more about the culture of the place. All right, you can also ask questions about the role or something relevant or related to that. You know, for example, if you're in technology, maybe it is something talking about, oh, what's RBC's approach to using artificial intelligence for our front end sort of consumer facing software or something like that, right? Sorry, I'm not a tech person. If you are, I might have butchered that, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm asking. You just want to have a conversation taking place. I also have a last question example here. You know, what are the next steps or timeline? Now, this is not something you want to ask right away. This shouldn't be your first question. You want to ask something relevant to the job or the company. This is like a last question just before you walk out the door. You know, maybe, can you tell me what the next steps are? Having said that though, most of the time the recruiter or the manager will tell you what the next steps are before they actually come. But it's just there for you as the ultimate backup question, the last question to ask. All right, next slide. Perfect. Now, in the whole spirit of being memorable in the interview process, when the interview is over, it's advisable that you send a short thank you message, and preferably within 24 hours, you know, just kind of reinforcing, you know, thank you so much for meeting me. I appreciated the interview and the advice you gave, especially this part about this, that, the other. Nothing too long. You're not writing an essay, maybe 2 or 3 lines. again, it's another example of you trying to go one step above and beyond to show that you're really interested in the job and you want to be top of mind as they're making their final decisions. All right, so after the interview, send a follow-up note by email. It's always advisable. All right, and next slide. And believe it or not, after the interview, everything goes well, you were memorable, and they call you and they say, we'd like to offer you the particular role. At this stage of the process, they're going to talk about salary and benefits. They're going to also tell you that background checks will need to be completed. So they'll check your, education. They'll look at your credit history as well. And then, your reference checks and stuff like that will take place this time. Again, if you need some sort of accommodation due to a disability, it's an opportunity to let us know again. And they will also give you information about your first day, where your office is located. You might get some indication about the dress code on that floor and any other little items you may need to know about. And I believe that is it. Okay, Sonia, so I think I am ready. We're opening it up for some questions.
Thank you so much. It's time for you to type in your questions into the questions tab. So I'll start taking them up. There's a few questions already up here. So the question here is from Zishan saying, is there, okay, so no, so the presentation is for people who are eligible to work in Canada. So if you are not eligible to work in Canada, this presentation won't really help you. And next question here is from Fiorella. Just trying to see here. Okay, so everyone, I'm going to take interview related questions. If any other questions, you can hold off, but we will take interview related questions only today. Okay, so Ankita said, I read somewhere that you should use the STAR K approach. In the K being knowledge or learning should also be explained. What are your thoughts on that, Ronald?
So the K is actually quite new for me. I've never heard of the K approach, but definitely the STAR elements are a solid yes from me. If by K and knowledge means you should be able to show how your knowledge was applicable, I see no problem using it. Again, once you want to be tight and succinct in your responses, all right? You don't want to be just going on and on with your responses. But yeah, if it fits, I have no problem using it. But the star portion, I think, is the critical piece.
Thank you. I'm just to how many copies of your resume and cover letter should you be carrying when you go for an interview?
Again, maybe not you might not need to carry a cover letter. I would always say it's good to have at least one copy of your resume on hand. Now, usually the interviewer will have copies of your resumes. So usually I would say it might not be necessary, but you know what? I always believe in being prepared. So I would suggest always having at least one copy of your resume with you to carry at the interview.
All right. And how can you best negotiate salary?
How can you best negotiate salary? Again, so I would suggest that comes at the sort of offer stage. There'll be opportunities to talk with the recruiter at that point. Some roles may have the flexibility, while others, there might be sort of rigid boundaries in which they can go. But again, if you can really articulate why you think you should get a different salary than is being quoted, the recruiters are usually very open to the discussion.
All right, so next question is if ACCES employment members have access to exclusive job board by RBC. There isn't an exclusive job board, but RBC representatives are often in our office and they are meeting with people one-on-one. So you get the option to chat with these mentors from RBC and build a relationship with them one-on-one. So there isn't a special page for ACCES clients to apply for RBC jobs, but at the same time, we do have connections with RBC where RBC jobs are posted and sent out exclusively to our clients, and their resumes are sent directly to the HR or any hiring manager at that time at RBC.
And Sonia, if I may just add to that, just my own personal take. So from time to time, sometimes a recruiter may come to me and they have some special requests for diverse candidates who speak a particular language. I always reach out to ACCES, and then they share that job posting with their candidates, and I usually try to get those candidates profiled. Additionally, whenever we host a networking event, and again, let's say I'm doing something for newcomers in particular, I usually send the link to ACCES and they usually distribute it to their participants. So we really have a great relationship with ACCES, very symbiotic type relationship.
Thank you. Next question here is, yes, so everyone will get the recording of the session later for reference. So if you have signed up for this webinar, you will get a recording for sure. Okay, so let's say there's a phone interview and they happen to be in a busy area or a bus or train at that time. What do they do in that case?
Well, first of all, again, as I suggested, in an ideal world, you don't want to be in that particular area. Again, we would have called you before to set up a time that's convenient to you. The hope is that the convenience is that you are home somewhere or in a quiet space that you can take the call. And again, usually we ask you if you're available. So if you know you might not be able to be available for a particular time, feel free to let us know and then we'll reschedule. All right. But if you are in a space like that, for some reason that you can't escape, I would suggest that you let the recruiter know immediately as the call starts. They may quickly reschedule with you right away. As a last resort. That's not your go-to. That's a last resort approach. Okay?
Thank you. Next question is, how do you answer the question, what are your goals? That could be such a broad question. How would somebody answer that? And what is the hiring manager looking for?
Wow. Just the question alone, it is very broad. I would hope that, what your goals is within the context of the role that you're applying for. So in that might help narrow it down a little bit. Or maybe it is an opportunity for you to, again, as I mentioned in the presentation, maybe you want to get some clarity. And, when you say goals, what exactly, are you talking about my goals within the team or within my overall career? Then the recruiter might be able to come back and say, oh yeah, no, what's your career goals? Again, and it's that question where you see yourself in 5 years. Again, that question is very personal. But it's like, I see myself continuing to develop, maybe, taking on a more leadership role in the long term within the organization. So you want to give something answer that's relevant.
Thank you. Next question is it okay to ask a recruiter about the dress code for an interview, or should you just assume that you have to wear like a standard business suit?
I would assume for banking, I would assume a standard business suit. That it's better to be overdressed than to be underdressed, all right, or inappropriately dressed. A standard business suit is usual protocol. But if you're having a good conversation with the recruiter and you feel open to ask that question, that should be fine. But 99 out of 100 times, it's a standard business suit. So I would say go with the standard business suit.
Thank you. And if an interviewer asks about weaknesses, what should they say? Should they be honest or try to cover their shortcomings?
Again, a weakness, yes, it's good to reflect on a weakness that you probably have, but let me know how you've worked your way out of it or how you're currently working your way out of it. You know what? In the past, I'm just giving an example here. In the past, public speaking, was not my strong suit. But I knew that it was important for me to develop that skill, especially if I wanted to progress in my career. So what I would do is within my own team, on my examples like that, and just show me how you're working through the problem. There's no one answer to any weakness question. We really want to see your process.
Thank you. And how many questions is it okay to ask at the end to the interviewer?
For me, a rule of thumb is you want to maybe have at least 3 strong questions in your back pocket, so to speak. But in terms of the amount of questions, it's really dependent on the amount of time that's left in the interview process and how detailed it is. You might answer 2 questions, you might ask 2 questions and they're very detailed, and that might be sufficient. And then, or you might ask a question and then depending on how the person responds, there's a natural follow-up question you may want to ask. That way you make it more into a conversation. But again, at a high level, I'll say maybe have 2 to 3 questions, solid questions with you.
Thank you. So there's 2 parts of the resume. There's different types of experience that you have on your resume. So in regards to your technical experience related to the job, how much emphasis is given on that? Or is it mostly looking at what kind of a worker you are and how you would fit into the office or company?
Again, that is very dependent on the role. So, I know my technology recruiters, they definitely want to see the technical elements. So whatever programming languages, whatever sort of data analytical tools that you are familiar with, you can literally call them out by name. They probably know what they're looking for. That I think is very important. But they also would want to see, again, some of your more interactive behavioral elements as well. Because while your technicals are great, yes, we do want to know that you can work well within the organization. All right. Now, in other roles, like let's say sales and service, some of your more softer skills will take prominence. I want to know how well you work in teams, how well you build relationships. That one, having a technical background is neither here nor there. It doesn't impact you so much, right? In sales and service, I don't need somebody necessarily with a business background. If I see somebody with a lot of retail sales and service experience, that might actually be a strong suit for you in the application process. So it depends on the role.
Thank you. And how many times should you follow up after an interview?
Again, usually they will tell you, sometimes they'll tell you, I will get back to you within a week or so, for example. I would suggest letting that week play out. There's no need to bombard the recruiter before that time frame comes in. Outside of that, we've really built, we're trying to really strengthen our recruitment platform so that even you can log into your own platform to get a status update on your files. You'll know if you're still being considered or not. So I'll definitely say look at your online platform first, where you apply, and it'll be able to tell you there. And then wait for the time frame that they would have told you about. Outside of that, if let's say the week goes by or you see that your status is still ongoing, maybe one email will suffice. Again, do not bombard the recruiter with too many emails.
Thank you. And so Abhishek here has had 2 interviews so far, and both times he was told that an internal employee had been selected. How can he overcome this issue with organizations where they end up hiring from within, but are still interviewing outside?
Well, again, it could have simply gone to another external person. We will interview internal, external people when the role is open to everyone. We don't want to say limit somebody internally just because, all right? Now, at the end, it just so happened that those 2 roles that he applied for, yes, it did go to somebody internally. But we have a myriad of examples where internal, external employees did interview and an external employee actually got it over the internal. So I don't have a silver bullet response to that question. It really is a situational thing.
Thank you. And next question here is, so if you want to send a thank you note after the interview and you don't have the interviewer's emails, what should you do in that case?
So you would, if you don't have the actual manager who you interviewed with, contact information, usually they give it, but sometimes they might not. You would more than likely have the recruiter's email information. You can send it to the recruiter and ask them to pass it along to the manager. Or if you had a good rapport, you added that person on LinkedIn, and that person responded to you on LinkedIn, again, it's just another outlet. You can maybe drop a note that once a person has added you back. All right. But again, first step I would suggest, send it to the recruiter and the recruiter will pass it on.
Thank you. And does an interviewee or a candidate have to bring a reference letter for proof of past experience from their country?
You do not have to bring a reference letter to the interview stage, no. Again, when we get to the offer stage, then we'll start that conversation. But for the interview, you do not need to bring your reference letter.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so can you apply for jobs if there is no job advertised for it, but the company could have that position?
You can only apply to jobs that are available online, because there's no other way for us to receive your resume than attached to a job posting, if I understand that question correctly.
Okay, thank you. All right, and do you have to bring any sort of proof of job from before? Any documents or any certificates or awards?
Yeah, again, that sort of will come at the offer stage. No, at the interview, we're working with the resume and we're going to just be having a conversation based on that. again, now, unless the recruiter tells you to bring something particular when you're coming. But generally, no, you don't need to bring anything.
Okay, thank you. And so if people are applying for jobs, or there might be like they're applying for several jobs at the same time, and if they get a call, they might not recall which job they had applied to. What do you do in that case when you're on the phone and somebody's called you about a job?
No, again, there's nothing wrong with being open at that point in time. And thank you very much for inviting me to the interview. I did apply to, a couple roles or several roles at RBC. Can you just remind me for which particular job this interview is for? It's as simple as that.
What's the best thing to do when recruiters don't get back to you after an interview? Even after you've emailed them, followed up with them?
Okay, so good question. I want to encourage everyone, and it's a good question for everyone, because yes, sometimes you might not get a response. I want to encourage you, please do not necessarily take that as a personal insult to you. It's just sometimes the recruiters are bombarded with so many different things going on. Because, some roles, just to give a reference, always assume every role that you apply for, assume that there's over 250 or so applicants in there. All right, so there might be a lot going on. It is not a personal attack on you. Ideally, we'd love to respond to everybody, but sometimes things do fall through the crack. Please don't be discouraged. If you don't hear anything, let's say 2-3 weeks goes on, just continue looking for roles and applying again.
Thank you. And how should you answer questions, like technical questions? Like, is it okay to use acronyms?
Now, again, it depends. Generally speaking, I like to tell candidates, you want to give an answer in as plain a language as possible. And that could vary, right? If you're interviewing with a recruiter, which is usually your initial interview, recruiters might not fully understand all the technicalities of the role. So if you go off into some deep thought around, IFRS or GAAP, if you're doing finance and accounting, and you're going into all the technical accounting terms, the recruiter might not be fully familiar with everything. So you want to have a description that's easier to understand. Assume that everybody's a layman speaking. Now, when you're actually interviewing with a manager of the business group, they would probably be your boss. So they understand some of the technicals. So having a more technical, nuanced conversation with the actual manager in a face-to-face might be to your benefit, because it really shows that you have that intellectual rigor that may be required for the job. So I would say you want to be mindful of that. You want to vary that depending on what level of interview you're doing, who you're interviewing with. Again, one caveat I would say for all of this, as far as I'm aware, our technology recruiters are very specialized. They are very aware of all the technicalities. So they themselves may be able to comprehend a technical discussion. All right, so that's the technology route. But always with the manager that you're interviewing with, you can definitely have a technical discussion across the board in any business group.
Thank you. What's your best advice to overcome being nervous in an interview, especially for newcomers? They're not only just doing an interview, but they're doing an interview in a totally new environment, new place, new country. What is your best advice that you can give them?
Okay, good question. You know what? First of all, know that nervousness affects everyone. All right. I rarely know of anyone who is never at least a little nervous. Having said that, yes, you're in a new environment, it's a totally new cultural area, space, totally understandable. Again, some of the tips I mentioned before, you're going to interview, you want to get there early, go somewhere where you could kind of take deep breaths, compose yourself, and sort of get yourself ready. I would also add, even before that, it's practice, practice, practice. Okay? If you're with ACCES, take the opportunity to go to ACCES, let them give you some first, they give you tips in your resume, maybe setting up some time if there's opportunities for a mock interview or something like that. You want to sort of frame practice in that sense. All right? So all these other things could help alleviate some of the stress that you may have, and try as much as possible on the interview. It's a person you're talking to in the interview process. We're all human. You want to try to, start off good, right? Have the interaction, start off from the moment you meet them, you introduce yourself, shake hands, try to have a little conversation before you actually sit down, if possible, and just be calm and try your best. That's as best an advice I can give you. Hopefully those little tips can help, but I know it might not remove your nervousness completely.
Thank you. Does the dress code vary from company to company, or is there a standard dress code that everyone should follow?
For an interview, I would say that the standard, you should certainly dress professionally for all companies. Now, once you are working in the company, there may be different dress codes. Even within the bank, from division to division, there might be different dress codes. In areas that are customer facing, dress code is usually still very formal. But in back office functions, like our tech groups or wherever, where you're not really seeing customers, you could come in and you're doing work. Sometimes the dress code is a little more relaxed. So it can vary from business to business or organization to organization. But at the interview level, I always encourage you to dress professionally from the get-go.
Thank you. And how should you end the interview? Should you just end it by thanking them for their time, or should you use that time to summarize your strengths?
Oh man, you know what? It really depends on how the conversation is flowing. Again, they usually try to leave a little time at the end for you to ask them questions. So most likely it will end up with you asking a particular question. Then maybe at the end it's like, okay, no, that's okay. So thank you so much. That was all the questions I had. I really enjoyed the interview, and I look forward to maybe hearing from you. I really believe I can add strengths. I give that example as a kind of ideal situation. It does not necessarily always end like that. I would say you're going to play it by situation to situation. Make sure it's organic. All right. Don't end one way and then all of a sudden you just throw out all these strengths. It does not fit the conversation. You don't want to come across like you're pushing something down their throat, so to speak. Right? You want to be organic. So it really depends on how the conversation and the interview flows.
Thank you. And how do you answer, or how do you talk about your previous position when they ask you, why did you leave? Let's say you were let go, or you left because like during the training period, that because you didn't like the company or something like that?
Well, yeah, again, again, I don't have one silver bullet response to that. Maybe it is, the company, it wasn't the right fit. You always want to be cordial, even to companies you left. You want to be cordial in your response. All right. You're not here. Don't come out bashing another company. It's just not a good look.
All right, thank you. So it is 12 p.m. So this is all the time we had today. Thank you again so much, Ronald. Is there anything you'd like to add before I move forward?
No. Again, thanks to everyone for calling in. Love the questions. I always enjoy the question and answer section. It really adds more to the conversation than the one-way approach. I want to wish everyone a good luck. I know everybody's at different stages of their transition journey to Canada. But please stay positive. Sometimes it might seem like it's no hope and it's rough. A lot of people have gone through this process, and we are here to help. Things like this are designed to give you tips and advice. So please stay positive and stay focused.
Thank you so much, Ronald. And before everyone logs off, just so you know, if you have any more questions about interviews or resume tips, I know there were a lot of other questions you asked regarding job search. You can go to our website and click on ACCES, and there's tons of different tiles that you can click under, and there's previous webinars. There are other resources that you can look at as well that will help you answer your question. Our next webinar, our next RBC webinar coming up is called What Every Newcomer Should Know About Credit. There's a lot of things that we don't know about credit and what it can do to either make you make your finances better or hurt your finances. So tune in. It's happening on March 26th, so you can sign up for it, register for it, just like you did for this one. And our webinar that's coming up on Wednesday, March 11th, is called Unlock the Power of LinkedIn for Job Seekers. So we try to bring in one LinkedIn webinar a month. So this one's coming up. Hopefully you can gain a lot from it. And for people who are on their way to Canada and you have your COPRs and you belong to any one of these sectors, you can already start with your job search through our pre-arrival support. You can email cec@accessemployment.ca and we can start helping you with your job search before you land in Canada, depending on your eligibility. And add us on Instagram. We are very socially active on all of our social media platforms. So if you want to know what's happening at ACCES, whether it's in-house, on-site, or off-site, or online, it will all be posted on our social media. So follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook to find out more. And again, thank you all for your questions. Thank you for watching the webinar today. And Ronald, a very big thank you to you again.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.